day, everyone. I am Sarah Joyce Rulloda, your discussant for today. For today's discussion, we will be discussing about the critical literacy and the arts. Under critical literacy, we will be discussing first, the meaning of critical literacy, second, critical literacy and the arts, third, the four resources model, and lastly, literacy and the Australian curriculum for the arts. According to Top Hat, critical literacy is a learning approach where students are expected to examine various texts to understand the relationship between the language and the power it can hold. Students critically analyze and evaluate the meaning of texts as they relate to topics on equity, power, and social justice. These texts are then used to equip with a critical stance, response, or action toward an issue. Critical literacy and the arts. The creation of artistic products by an individual and the perception and reflection upon others' artwork showcase the power of critical literacies at work within art context. Luke 2000 argues that it is the primary aim of critical literacy to first allow students to see how texts work to construct their worlds, their cultures, and their identities in powerful, often overtly ideological ways. Second, to understand how they use text as social tools in ways that allow for a reconstruction of these same worlds. All texts produced by a culture both reflect the culture itself and the wider world in some way. And everything that critical literacy says about language and literacy as social practices that inevitably carry ideology is as true of aesthetic texts as of any other kinds of texts. Beyond the conscious inclusion of aesthetic elements, an artist's work is imbued with particular values, attitudes, and beliefs from his or her particular discourse. Similarly, artworks viewed by the audience are understood through the perceiver's lens of discourse, and thus meaning is made. In this sense, both the practice and understanding of art forms and being critically literate are interconnected. Indeed, according to Landshire and Mark Laren 1993, cited in Morgan 2002, critical literacy makes possible a more adequate reading of the world, on the basis of which people can enter into rewriting the world into a formation in which their interests, identities, and legitimate aspirations are more fully present and present more equally. The arts, literacies, and reality are dramatically linked, and the understanding attained by critically reading aesthetic texts involve perceiving the relationship between the art, its creator, and its context. The Four Resources Model. Free Body and Luke's Four Resources Model is a four-tiered approach to sets of social practices necessary for critical literacy and reading instruction. Can be employed by students for understanding and composing artworks. It was developed to acknowledge that reading and writing practices were not exclusive but needed to be authentically and purposefully contextualized to ensure meaning was made beyond the text itself. As such, the Four Resources Model emphasizes an importance on critical literacy, which involves a theoretical and practice attitude towards text in the social world. To achieve this, there are four explicit roles of the reader that allow for the social and textual realms to converge and make meaning. To achieve this, Luke and Peabody 1999 have outlined four necessary but not sufficient roles for the reader in a postmodern text-based culture. The four roles are: first, the code breaker, which uses the coding competence; second, the text participant, which uses student semantic competence; third, the text users, which uses students' pragmatic competence; and lastly, the text analyst, which uses the critical competence. Firstly, decoding and cracking the code, which requires a coding competence skill. This refers to the ability to break the code of the written text by recognizing and using fundamental features in architecture, including alphabets, sound in words, spelling, and structural conventions and pattern. Furthermore, recognizing an artwork's textual features depends greatly on understanding of form, technique, and the various artistic elements exclusive to the form. In addition, a strong understanding of symbolism, which is frequently grounded in social and cultural discourses, is key when trying to understand an artist's intent. Luke and Peabody 1999 maintain that all four resources are of equal importance as students engage in several practices together, and similarly, Barton 2013 states that once students are initiated into the discourse of understanding and critiquing art using relevant terminology, a second notion of literacy comes into play when the students themselves become artists. This aligns with the four resources model's second competent regarding text meaning practices, which requires semantic competence. In this matter, the ability to participate in the meanings of the text can allow students to draw upon knowledge of existing forms and practices, which allows for understanding and composition of meaningful written, visual, spoken text, and multimodal art forms. This points to students being literate within aesthetic discourses in order for the development of a new work to be realized. The four resources model's third component regarding pragmatic practice to use text functionally speaks to how students make and consume artistic products within the wider world. This occurs intrinsically when students are engaged in the arts education practice. As the Department of Education and Children's Services 2002 stated that the arts play a major role in defining and interpreting our culture, heritage, and society, and in celebrating our diversity as a nation. They inspire, entertain, transform, instruct, and challenge the way we see, listen, and comprehend. The arts expand our understanding, knowledge, and creativity. Finally, the four resources model's fourth tier concerning critical practices and being able to critically analyze and transform text is again inherent to artistic practice. Ewing 2011 argues that critical engagement through arts processes can help us to see things from a different perspective and suggest connections between different phenomena that were not previously recognized. The arts can promote self-understanding and illuminate the advantages of viewing the world from multiple perspectives. They can thus be conceptualized as critical quality pedagogy. Just as literacy is a social practice, the arts and aesthetic practices are shaped by discourse and rely on the interaction between maker and consumer to bring forth meaning and critical understanding and perspectives. Literacy and the Australian Curriculum for the Arts. The recently released Australian Curriculum for the Arts for the first time has articulated a concrete national Australian policy regarding curricula and the arts experience for all school students. While the document is now ready for implementation in schools, reflection and analysis of the policy in its final form by the teachers, academics, and researchers is still taking place. In 2011, when the Australian curriculum was still in the drafting stage, Ewing 2011 in her report, The Arts and Australian Curriculum Education, Realizing Potential, argued that the current manifestation of a national curriculum for the Australian children continues to privilege a traditional subject hierarchy with the traditional textual understanding of literacy, reading and writing, along with numeracy taking priority. Academic achievement is measured by proficiency in literacy and to a lesser extent numeracy. The seemingly contradictory gap between rhetoric and reality about the importance of the arts continues. Ewing went on to explain that The then Commonwealth Minister for the Arts, when announcing that the arts would be part of the second phase of the Australian curriculum, declared that creativity, interpretation, innovation, and cultural understanding are all sought after skills for new and emerging industries of the 21st century. Arts education provides students with the tools to develop these skills. This illustrates the gap and disconnect between traditional notions of literacy and the acknowledgement of complex multimodal and multiliteracies at play within arts contexts. Curiously, in the literacy section of the final Australian curriculum document, ACARA, it still considers how the arts foster more traditional literacy practices rather than considering what makes a student arts literate or what faculties of multimodal literacies are practiced. The document states that students become literate as they develop the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to interpret and use language confidently for learning and communicating in and out of school and for participating effectively in society. Students use literacy when listening to, reading, viewing, speaking, writing, and creating oral, print, visual, and digital text. Literacy involves students using and modifying language for different purposes in a range of a context. Share and explain ideas, discuss concepts, work collaboratively, participate in class discussions, write or talk about their work or other people's work, and present or introduce work. Use words and images or objects as stimulus. Research the context of an artwork. Ask questions about an artwork. Language in its written and spoken forms is still at the core of what literacy means. This is quite the opposite to Eisner's 2002 assertion that arts themselves show that the limits of language are not the limits of cognition, and that schools need to foster the cultivation of literacy in its many forms. Exploration of multimodality and multiliteracies is imbued within various descriptors in the document, but there is an absence of the acknowledgement of the complexity of the literacy practices, and they appear as more of an add-on. The document states that students use literacy along with the kinetic, symbolic, and verbal and visual languages of the five art subjects. While the document puts forth that highly complex phenomena are at play within aesthetically charged arts education classrooms, creativity, critical thinking, aesthetic knowledge, and understanding about arts practices through making and responding to artworks. They are just simply viewed as actions that fall outside of the realm of what constitutes literacy and being literate. The idea that students communicate ideas in current, traditional, and emerging forms requires deep understanding of literacy practices that go beyond the limits of traditional notions of literacy and language. This should be recognized in the Australian curriculum document. While there are key differences in the practice and doing of each art form, drama, dance, media studies, visual art, and music, there are a number of parallels and overlaps as to what counts as literate practices in the arts. Barton 2013 argues that, essentially, this boils down to the ability to function within an art form as a maker and consumer. It is clear that further research is needed into what exactly this means, so that future policies and curriculum can be shaped to reflect arts literacies in a more fitting manner. In conclusion, critical literacy indeed plays a vital role in education contexts. It serves as the key in perceiving and understanding more about the different views in the world through reading and writing. Critical literacy focuses on examining and analyzing deeper the meaning of the different literary works and masterpieces made by authors and artists that conveys the different angles, sides, and faces of the world. Furthermore, the four resources model of Peter Peabody and Alan Luke serves as the backbone of critical literacy. This model was developed in order to understand the meaning beyond different literary works. Through this model, students will be able to enhance motor coding, semantic, pragmatic, and critical ability and skills. That's all for my discussion. I hope you enjoyed and learned something new. If you did, don't forget to click the like button and comment down below what are the learnings you learned from my discussion. Thank you!